Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday edition of ICB TV. We've got a very dull and dank, very wet sort of day down here in London. I hope some of you are getting better weather and still maintaining that, and the beginning of summer, end of spring, whatever on earth this is. I think everybody's getting a bit confused at the moment. And for the sake of irony, I am today wearing this badge. You probably can't see that. It's a small badge. That says I'm a freeman of the City of London. I was made a freeman of the City of London, which means I can wander through the city at will, except it means absolutely nothing at the moment. So I hope the irony gets to you all as well. So anyway, I am pleased to have along with me today as my guest, ICB's Director of Learning, Peter Stewart. Hi, Peter.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I thought as a freeman of London, you could herd sheep across London Bridge or something like that.
I can on occasions. One is invited to, I think you put your name in a hat or something or other, or something, and then you are drawn out of that. Now, last time I was due to do that. That was not this last January, the January before, and then I ended up with with pneumonia. Which is why I am locked away here, because being of a tender age and also having had pneumonia, and my lungs are all to pot apparently, I'm supposed to stay away from everybody. So it's a good excuse. It's the best one I can think of. So everybody, we have today had two programs on the Inspire Tour. The first one this morning being about payroll, an update on payroll from Claire Warner, and then of course this afternoon Peter has done the cash flow. Now Peter joined us having been with all sorts of organizations, and he's with as our Director of Learning. So learning is we've just given him a very broad title so we can change our minds as we go along either side, really, I think. So Peter, I mean, learning, it encompasses everything from exams, but also how they interact with membership and how it all feeds through. Is that right?
Yes, yes. I had a little crackle on the reception there, but yeah, I think I briefly explained in the presentation that number one, there's working out what needs to be learned. So we describe that as in our syllabus, and then secondly, we work out how we can tell whether you've learned what needs to be learned. So we put that through in the exams, and thirdly, then we also work with our learning partners, approved training partners, to make sure that they can help our aspiring members to learn what needs to be learned. So there's a little circle in there. And of course, as you alluded to, then there's the ongoing learning that needs to take place, whether that's technical updates or learning what we might call non-core content that will help some members to be able to come up with more billable work. Then that's one thing we look at, and that's really where the cash flow forecasting comes from. Not all bookkeepers will be conducting cash flow forecasting, but it is something that I try to explain as being potentially very valuable to many of the clients.
Well, I'm intrigued. I've got an anonymous person here who says cash flow is excellent, thank you. But I've also got one from Sue Raisin who said, very interesting and engaging presentation on cash flow forecasting from Peter. Thanks very much.
Oh my goodness.
And the last two questions were laugh out loud moments. Much appreciated. What on earth were the last two questions?
No. Did you get the answers to the last two? So I recorded the session sitting in this here chair, with that there background and with a shirt and tie on. And on occasion, when I felt the need to take a break and allow time for the editors to cut out any goofs that I've made, the camera was off, so I changed tie. And I changed tie a number of times throughout the recording. And one of my questions was, how many different ties did Peter wear during the presentation? The answer of which was 5.
So you really wanted people to go back through your presentation again so that they could count them, so that you get an extra tick in everybody's box. I know what it's all about.
Are you paying attention to the wrong things? Because of course, as we get to see people in each other's rooms, whether it's Robert Peston in his messy room or whoever, we love having a snoop around and looking in the background. So I did ask the question, which 2 albums were on show in the background while I was presenting?
Peter, could I just say, don't give away all the answers in case people haven't had a chance to do the.
Oh, dear me. Well,
but somebody has said they weren't able to see, so maybe it's useful.
Yeah, that's Sandra. Sandra's just said that. Yeah, hi, Amy.
People can look to see how seamless the editing was, and the ties. Yeah, there's some subtle differences. So, but yeah, it is that.
Yeah, a couple of summits ago, I actually changed tie, my pocket handkerchief, my shoes, and my socks, depending on who I was bringing up onto stage. So I wore green for Sage, I wore orange for Receipt Bank, etc., and only a few people really noticed, which says a lot, I think. But never mind. And Claire has said I got 1 out of 2 correct, which is 1 more than I thought I would get, which is not very good, really. But never mind, Claire.
Oh, are we just focusing on the 2 non-technical questions? Is that?
I think that's what they're looking at. I mean, Nicola has just said, thanks for the heads up on the questions. We haven't all done this yet. So well done, Amy, for in there.
Well, you get an extra chance to look around while we're chatting this afternoon.
Oh, right. Apparently I'm a bit glitchy today. This is because I've got the background on, because I'm in a different room today, and it's behind me is actually a sea of storage boxes. Don't look very good, so I've used the background. So I'm going to try and sit still. I've already been told by Peter that my hair looks as if I've got a ponytail and it's swirling away in the wind there, but that is not the case. I haven't donned the ponytail or the man bob just yet. Getting there, I have to say. It's getting longer by the day, but until I can get out of this lockdown and go and see my barber, I'm afraid I'm stuck with this. And anyway, so yeah, Peter is fine. It's just Garry for some reason, but that's what they always say. Last time was the nicest, just for the record, says Anonymous.
Oh my goodness, no, that's a question back at me. Which was the last time?
And Ian says, are you sure it was Peter and not his 4 brothers doing the presentation?
No clues, guys, no clues. Does anybody have a cash flow question? That's really the thing, isn't it? Is anybody doing cash flow for their employer or their clients?
It is a question. Whilst they're thinking about that, and we're waiting for some people to come in, because the questions are coming in already. Peter, I mentioned before, obviously, you are director of learning, and one of the big things, the big successes we've had over the last couple of weeks, is that we've introduced proctored exams. Now, this has all been down to you and your team, Alison, Polly, etc. Just explain how it all works for those of our listeners who are either not doing their M8 yet or are not having to do their M8 because they did that years ago. How does it all work?
Oh, this is I would say it's wonderful, wouldn't I? But it's wonderful, and I think the result, I'm so pleased with it, having brought it along and see how it works. So we've partnered with a company that's based in the Netherlands called Proctored Exams, who use the latest technology to bring an invigilator into the examinee's room, if you like. So that instead of having to go to a Pearson VUE test centre, which might be some distance across the country, it might be difficult to find a slot when the time suits you. You can actually sit the exam in a workspace that you set for yourself at home. I did one of the test exams. I did it sitting at this desk. The state of my desk probably wouldn't have passed muster for an ICB invigilator. But the great thing is that as I was doing the exam, my webcam was recording, as was the microphone. And sitting across the room there, kind of on top of our piano over there, I had my tablet, which was operating as a camera. Through an app, it was synced to the webcam and everything that was going on the screen. So an invigilator is able to see whether I'm looking here, it can hear whether I'm having a conversation, and also using the third or the second eye in the room, they can see whether anyone comes in, goes out, whether I've got notes that are on my lap underneath the desk that I'm looking at. And so we have virtual invigilation. We have identification at the start of the process, where I would hold up my driving license to the camera, and we have a snapshot of that. We have a snapshot of my face. So yes, my twin brother or any one of the other three of them could come in, but they could do that in the Pearson VUE Test Centre. So everything works, and all the standards that we require for security, validity at the Pearson VUE Test Centre are delivered. And of course, we have then the recording of that. So Alison had great fun watching the recording of me taking the M8 exam. And say this for the people on the receiving end of this, I did it at about 10 to 8 on a Thursday evening, week before last. Lost track of time, and then there was this tremendous racket outside the window there as all the neighbours went out with their pots and pans at 8 p.m. to cheer on the NHS. So I was doing my clapping from here, and Alison watched it on fast forward, said it looked like an old black and white movie from the 1920s or something like that. Playing the part of a seal. But yeah, so we can review that if we like. We can see what the person's behaviour is. Of course, we've got the data on people's exams before M8, so we can look at the performance in M8 compared with M7, M6, M5, M4. So we've got what we feel is a very, very secure invigilation system that is now super flexible. It can be done any hour of the day, any day of the week. And say all you need is a steady internet connection. So if people are using Wi-Fi, we urge them to get their family not to be streaming 5 different Netflix movies or whatever might take up the bandwidth. It's just a bit of peace and quiet, reasonable internet connection, a clear workspace. So mine is cluttered with teapots, books, tablets, phones, calculators. It would just be a few sheets of paper, your calculator, pen. That's what we expect to be able to see.
Yeah.
And then it's good and go. And we've had agreement from our external quality assurance through the apprenticeship program to offer the endpoint assessment for apprentices who have, they're on a fairly strict time schedule. They've got to do a number of hours of practice, and there's a number who are coming up to the exam and would have been wondering what to do. And I know with other examining bodies, endpoint assessors, they're wondering what to do, and kind of we've got there first for the apprenticeships that we offer. So hopefully we're running as normal, without a hitch, because of being able to get this. There were a couple of people who had to wait a couple of weeks while we just got the thumbs up from everyone to run this process, but it's going strong and it's going well.
Yeah, I'm very pleased, and the feedback on social media has been absolutely fantastic. Everybody is very positive about it. Everybody thinks they've had a good time. So that's really good. I must admit the delay, if you like, I think was probably caused more by me, because I announced this as soon as we came up with it as an idea, and obviously then it needed a bit of testing in period. which my audience hadn't banked on, and they were expecting it in the afternoon as they came off ICB TV to be able to pick up straight away and do a proctored exam. So I keep forgetting this with our members. Once you mention something, they expect it immediately. So that's another lesson for me, I'm afraid. I haven't learned it before, but I'm going to try and learn it this time. Just looking at people coming on now, the Titleys, whoever the Titleys are, says, I do cash flow. The Titleys? Oh, well, I can't quite see who that is from. Andy says, would it be prudent to include a projected P&L and balance sheet as part of a cash flow forecast?
It's an interesting one, and I would probably say yes, but it's got a very different purpose. I mean, as I explain in the presentation, the cash flow forecast is something that is fluid. That's probably why they called it fluidly. It's flexible, and it's a living document. You know, it's there to say what happens if we have to go into lockdown. What happens if we furlough our staff? How does that change the position? And it looks for rocks under the water ahead of us.
Yeah,
and helps us to navigate those. Now, the profit and loss account is ultimately, it's an end result of all of our activities, as is the balance sheet. And the reason that I think it's nice to have that is it's a comfort blanket almost, that we're all bookkeepers, we all talk profit and loss account, we all talk balance sheet. And if we can see what a profit and loss account will look like in 6 months, 12 months time, then that kind of, it's reassuring. But I think that the main point that I start off with an illustration of, you know, why the profit and loss account isn't necessarily the best tool to work from, because of the way we account for accruals, prepayments, and so on. Things like depreciation, which isn't a cash flow, but we're told we have to account for it. It has its weaknesses as a management tool. So yes, it's easy to see what the profit and loss account would look like when you've made your decisions and when you've made your plans. But I would make my decisions and plans from cash flow forecasting first.
We've got another one here from Animus. Good old Annie. Do I need to do an additional certificate to do a cash flow statement for a client? I think the answer at the moment is, do I need to do an additional certificate to do a cash flow statement for a client? So this is looking at our exam structure, I think, at the moment, isn't it?
No, you don't. You don't. Because one of the things, and I did see a question talking about templates for cash flow forecasting. One of the things is that you're not bound by templates, any regulatory requirement as to how a cash flow forecast will look. You know, try not to get confused between a cash flow statement, which you are required to do under FRS, the cash flow forecast, which is your document. It looks the way you want it to be. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, you know, more frequent is better than less frequent, but it depends on the nature of your business. If you have a small number of large contracts that you're doing, maybe weekly or monthly forecasting isn't as informative as it is for, you know, a high volume, small unit transaction business. So we have cash flow forecasting within the management accounting level 4 certificate. One of the things I've been working on when I have moments of peace and quiet here is the replacement for that management accounting certificate, which fingers crossed will still be online by September. And that will focus maybe a little bit more on the issues that you should think about, but you don't need to have that for a while.
So how does this fit in with the costing and budgeting?
Well, again, within the budgeting, it is a component of the costing and budgeting and the management accounting syllabuses, but it's not a full thing, you know. And you know, the only person, well, maybe not the only person, but the people who will be looking at your cash flow forecast are first and foremost your clients, and it's a topic for conversation. It's a it will start off a conversation, and then you take it away and you rejig it based upon the conversation and the findings and the ideas that you have, and it's back and forth. I think my final slide it shows the cycle. It's not set in stone, and it's not going to be audited. The other people that might look at it are, of course, the banks and the lenders, who you've got to justify that you are in a position to repay the loans and maintain the interest and so on that's coming through. But it's not compulsory that you have done any particular certificate for that.
I think the cash flow, very much like the furloughing, it's something that's come even more to the fore for bookkeepers now, because more banks are asking for quite a lengthy cash flow projection, because their concern is that you might get through with their 100,000 or whatever it is that they lend to you. Will they ever be able to get that money back? Yeah. So we during this last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of our members saying that they are being asked for more and more cash flow projections. And for our members, it's a question of making sure that it is accurate. It is not based on a finger in the air. See, you know, how does that work? Anything like that. It's got to be very factual. And I think that's where bookkeepers actually come into their own, because they will see a client far more often than normally an accountant would do. And therefore, they have a much better feel for the business. They will know how tough it is to get the money in occasions, and where the money is, where the cash flow is likely to dip. And so I think it's very useful. And we had somebody on from Revolut Bank just saying that bookkeepers' figures, for that reason, do tend to be trusted quite highly by banks, because it means that they've got a finger on the pulse, not just occasionally, seeing clients, which I think that's great. But one of the things that has come across, I think, over the last couple of weeks is that we've got two schools of thought. We've got the Excel school, and then we've got the bespoke software school. And as you mentioned earlier, Caroline Plum was here the other day, Fluidly, but there are other organizations as well that are doing this. And there seem to be two things that came out against the Excel, as I could see it. One is that you have to put the data into Excel, and making sure that that data is put in correctly apparently is quite taxing, according to some of the small businesses that we've been speaking to. But the one thing I thought that of all the things Caroline said when prompted about her product, because she didn't really speak too much about her product, she was here to talk general topics. But one of the things that she said, which I think was quite useful, is that because it is linked directly to your accounts, it will look at the historical payment of your invoices from your main clients, and it will build that standard payment term into its projections. So you will put in your 30 days, but if your client is normally paying on 43 days, it will build that into the projection. So that seems to me to take away a lot of the extra guesswork that perhaps we might have to be involved with normally.
Yeah, I like the sound of that feature. I think that's very, very clever. I mean, I think one of the things that I've said in the presentation is that, yeah, using something like Fluidly as an app or as a piece of software will get you a cash flow, and I think you have to be careful about the wording. It's a cash flow prediction, and it's based on past patterns of payment and receipts and behaviors and so on. And yeah, so it's very, very statistical, and no reason why it wouldn't be accurate. You know me, I'm a mathematician who did statistics for a couple of years in my degree, so I think it's fantastic. But I'm also aware of the risk that you might have in just relying on it and thinking, oh, the computer says these will be the numbers. That the bookkeeper knowing what that business is and knowing how the transactions arise and having the conversations with a business owner, should be able to interrogate them and should expect to interrogate that prediction that comes out and query almost line by line. Say that you take that client who pays in 43 days. What would be the result of having a conversation with that client? Could you get them in line if the invoice says 30 days? Maybe you give some incentive, slightly better, maybe a discount for early settlement or prompt settlement. And can you change those figures? So turn it from a prediction into that forecast of what do we think is actually going to happen based upon our behavior, our customers' behavior, our suppliers' behavior, product mix, external factors, economic factors that might have an influence on what's going on. So yes, the plus side of having the software is, especially these very, very clever pieces of software, is it takes out an awful lot of the donkey work to put it together. But if you're building it from scratch on a spreadsheet, then you kind of have to think about each line as you're putting it in. And it's time consuming, but you do that analysis while you're creating it and ask the questions and get the conversation points ready to speak to the business owner.
I always thought Excel was quite a fun tool, really. I mean, I haven't used any of the newer software extensively, but the idea that when you put your figures into Excel and you add a couple of pound in somewhere or take a couple of pound out, how the end figure suddenly gets a bracket round it, and it's so easy to do that. And I think if businesses are aware that actually quite minor moves can make a huge difference to cash flow, and as you say, getting people to pay on 30 days or even 35 instead of 40, that extra 5 days of having that money in your account can be quite critical, really, and particularly at times like these. But I think as bookkeepers, we have a duty really to explain to our clients just how important cash flow is if they don't already know. And I think a lot of companies, cash flow is a sort of a thing that happens, not a thing that you plan for. So I think we need to be spending more time explaining to people, well, look, what I can do for you is this, and look what you can achieve, and look at the decisions you can make based on this. And so I'm really pleased that we're doing more and more in the cash flow part of our standard syllabus. And I think the costing and budgeting, when that is fully appreciated, I think that will be useful. Because I mean, budgeting is an even bigger thing, isn't it? You can look at how you price a product. Yeah. And it surprised me. I've done some work with small businesses through one of the parliamentary organisations I work with. A lot of businesses hadn't actually calculated overhead costs into the price of their product. So they thought products were making themselves a lot of money. And it turned out, actually, by the time you look at it, you're not selling enough product to cover your base costs of and you as the proprietor of the business. So, yeah, I think we have to give them a bit of learning, Peter. That's big learning.
Yeah, and I mean, again, anyone who's worked in I would say in a larger organization, and as you know, I've worked for, well, 5 very large organizations, but 4 where I've had some budget control and budget input. The budget period, or the period when the budget's being prepared, and the budget process is so much seen as almost seen as a box ticking exercise. And you're asked to prepare certain reports, and then they disappear down a rabbit hole somewhere where the finance business partners take control of them. And then they come back and they say, well, can you cut it by 5%? And if that's expected, then what people are doing is building in budget slack, so adding 10% to what they think they'll be doing, because they know they'll be cut 5%. And it just becomes that game of passing sheets back and forward and not actually coming up with good decision making and good aspects for control that you were saying. Yeah, you prepare a budget so that you have a plan that everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing for the forthcoming period, and you can see where it's heading financially with the cash flow and where the profit and loss might look and so on. You can spot again the rocks below the surface that during March and April we're going to be short on cash. Now, is there anything that we can change because of that, rather than a flat 5% reduction? If it doesn't look like we're making a profit, why not? Like you say, have we considered properly, or are we making a remarkably large profit? Is there any cost that has been excluded? So the budget, again, the process of putting it together should be dynamic, and it probably, well, it's something again that the bookkeepers who have spent the last year working on all the transactions, seeing the invoices, seeing the bills coming in, and putting them together into the financial records, should be able to sit down and have that conversation with the business owner and say, when going forward, this is how it looks from my perspective. What would you like to do differently? Are there any areas of the business that maybe say areas of service that you offer or products that you offer that you're not making enough margin on? Is there any way that we can look to see how you can deliver that service or product, cutting some costs without losing the sale? And that all happens through planning and budgeting and having that holistic view of the organization, of the business, and as I say, it's coming up with a smart plan of where you want to go.
I mean, obviously you talked about cash flow projections for the business person themselves. We talked about banks, but Andy has just said it. The cash flow forecasts are very often requested as part of sales documentation for the sale of a business, so that the potential buyer can scrutinize them. And I think this is becoming increasingly part of the whole takeover process, because it's all very well taking over a good top line business, but if the cash isn't flowing, it could be detrimental to the business that's buying them out. So I think it's very important that they do that.
Yeah, and it's if you were buying a business, you would want to know when you're going to get your return. And so if I'm selling a business to you and I come and say, look, I've got 25 regular clients who give me business worth X hundreds, thousands of pounds, and talk it together, and then the first thing you would want to see as a potential buyer is that, oh, how does that look? Give me more information, more detail. How is it going to come in? Because then if you give me £1 million for my business, if these clients are fictitious, uncommitted, bad payers, or whatever, then of course you're going to be stung. So it's sensible for you to scrutinize that as closely as you can. And if I've got good budgets, and if I've got a cash flow forecast that I can just pop out like that as soon as you ask, then you should have more confidence that I don't just have that. I've not just made up numbers. I've got this, and then you can ask for more detail. What are these payments that are coming in every quarter? What type of business is that? So it's just, it's an absolutely valid point to make, but it's additional evidence that the financial statements, the regulated financial statements, don't do that. And as I said a while ago, all they do anyway is tell you what happened last year. And as an investor, you want to know what's happening this coming year.
And I think it's worth remembering as well that like you've just been saying, really, this should not be a one-off when you need money from the bank or somebody or your client asks the question. If you can organize a running cash flow, that's when it becomes important and usable on a day-to-day basis, rather than just to fight a fire or to answer a question that somebody's thrown at you.
It's a very, very good discipline to have. I'm trained as a chartered accountant. I spent most of my teaching life and educational life thinking about management accounting and financial management. And the difference between financial accounting and management accounting is stark. Financial accounting, what happened up until the end of last year, and a few things post balance sheet. Management accounting is, we're here, we want to get over there. How are we going to do it? And what will it look like when we're there? And what are the rocks along the way? And what are the tree roots that we might trip over? And is there any way that we can navigate around those? And entrepreneurs think in that way. They think ahead. So most of your clients are going to be entrepreneurial. Well, they must be. They set up their businesses and they're focusing on the product. They're focusing on the clients and so on. So they do need that helping hand. Like I said, a discipline that helps them avoid any foreseeable problems. And of course, as we're all sitting at home, not getting to our offices and so on, we know that there's risk, and we can try and think of what risks there are and mitigate or have plans in place when we make that forecast. What happens if the supplier goes bust? What happens if that major customer disappears? And how can we make the best of a bad situation? Again, playing around with and I do use the phrase playing around, and that's probably just because I'm a numbers person and I like going back into spreadsheets and seeing what if. To me, it's not a family game, but it's a game that I'll play. It's useful. It's useful to understand what happens if that goes wrong or this goes right. Let's always focus on the negative. If another opportunity comes along, have we got the capacity to operate with it? So yeah, it's a great discipline to have that conversation about where you're going, rather than just thinking about your product and worrying about just the bottom line and thinking that things will move along nicely.
One of the big things that you're doing now for us, and one of the reasons that we brought you into the organization, was that we have a level 4, which was always regarded as not the area for a bookkeeper. They were definitely level 3, and then you hand it over to one of these superior powers, these accounting type people. But government has changed the rule book a little bit in bringing in FRS 105 to start with, and now FRS 102, 1A, etc. So that's good. We're moving in that way. And then we had this weird thing called management accounting, and that was probably my fault, actually, because what I thought was management accounting and what everybody else thought was management accounting is different. And one of the first things you've done is changed it to business insight.
Yeah.
So what exactly is business insight?
Well, the reason to move away from the phrase of management accounting, partly it's a massive area. There is a chartered institute just for management accounting, and that goes, their syllabus goes from level 3, 4 to level 7. There's all sorts of factors that are in there, and it tends to look at, and most management accounting syllabuses that I've come across, whether they're university or for other accounting bodies, even at the level 4, they're talking about mass production and managing costs, etc., managing cost, decision-making control within large companies, international organizations, and so on. So there are a lot of topics that sit within syllabuses that are topics that most bookkeepers with small, micro, medium-sized businesses will never come across. So the first thing I wanted to do was get away from thinking about management accounting and people trying to link what we do under the guise of management accounting with what they'd see elsewhere. So that's why not management accounting, which I know wasn't your question. But what the management accountant does in those large businesses, apart from these strange technical things, what they do is they support that business moving forward. And they do that by gathering information about the business, processing that information in a way that relates to numbers, primarily generating cash, generating profit. And they use the combinations of knowing the business, knowing how the transactions affect cash flows and business and profit, and they provide their insight to couple that with the knowledge that the business owner or business manager has, and find those opportunities and find the problems and navigate that path forward. So I landed on the phrase of business insight, really just to distinguish from management accounting and try and focus on what the bookkeeper can do. That's a step that's beyond what the accountant who comes along for the year-end audit might do for a limited company. Is being under the skin of the business and its transactions allows you to share thoughts and ideas and have conversations with the business owner and make these plans and make the company more efficient, profitable, etc. So yeah, it's using insight to enhance profitability and efficiency in the organizations, help with decision making. There are still some aspects like planning what's going to happen and making sure that you have controls in place that you know, the bookkeeper and the business owner should be comfortable with and should be aware of. So there will be some language that carries over between what most people see as management accounting and what bookkeepers want to offer as a value adding service, to jump in on one of the phrases that sits up in the syllabus.
Yeah. I think when I first envisaged this, I was aware that some bookkeepers felt that it was their role to complete the books, hand them over to the business person, and then walk away again. And I think over the 24 years now that we've been running ICB, we've moved far more towards, yeah, that's all very well, but if you leave them something they don't understand, it's a total waste of time. And I saw very much at the full member level, people, fellow member, and particularly at fellow level, a little more was going to be expected of them. In fact, a lot more, I think, certainly by the Institute, if not the members. But it's all about explaining it in a way that they understand it. Because, you know, and I think this comes back from my background, where I really have no idea what accountants talk about. Even to this day, I have to ask so many questions before I think I understand what's in a set of accounts. And that could be, you know, it could be my problem. But at the end of the day, I'm no different to a lot of other business people. And I've said earlier this week on here, the only people that go into business to do the books are accountants and bookkeepers. Yeah. Every other business, it's a blessing and a curse. You've got to have them. You need them. You have no idea what they mean. And I think that it's very important. And you mentioned it in having more contact, etc. That's what it's all about. And we make that contact more and more relevant and necessary, and therefore protect ourselves and our profession, if we provide management with something that they blatantly don't get from anywhere else. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and you're right. To go back on something that you said before, the idea of having these new level 4 certificates that allow the bookkeeper to do more for the client. I'm trying to think of another service that I might have where one person would do one thing and then somebody else comes along to finish it off. I don't think, you know, I don't think it seems to make sense. I go to the dentist and the dentist does everything. It doesn't do one does the anesthetic, then wheel me into another room who'll do the drilling, and the next person does whatever the next person does. The more you as a bookkeeper can provide a full service to your clients, the more comfortable that client should feel, not having to learn other people's names, habits, and how to correspond with them. And it is seamless to go from preparing the books to filing the financial statements. Same with the tax. And you know, the other thing, we're not, you know, we're not an institute for taxation. We don't do tax planning in the way that, you know, you might have for a large corporate. But again, because you're watching the invoices come in, you're watching the way the business operates, you know the taxation impact of a transaction taking place in this way compared to that way. So you can have that quick word with the client and say, look, if you were to, I don't know, if you were undertake a lease rather than to buy the asset outright, then this would be the impact for tax. It would also be the impact for cash flow. So yeah, it's that wraparound service. You could have clients where you just prepare the books, all they want, prepare the books, file the accounts, that's it, done. But the bookkeeper can be so much more valuable, and I'll be absolutely certain that the people watching this just now and the membership at large, they want to provide more of a service. They want to build those relationships, strengthen that relationship by having more strands to it. And that's what we look to try and develop through added certificates, focusing the learning or the content of the syllabus on the service that's provided for the types of members and types of clients they have.
Yeah, I think it's important that we do that. I mean, I'm actually going to have to duck out of this in a minute. Amy's going to finish off the program tonight, everybody. It's because I'm actually being interviewed by Rob Brown. Yeah. Those of you who don't know Rob, he is an online commentator, and he talks to lots of organizations, and he wants to know a little bit more about how everything's going for bookkeepers during COVID and how that is different to the bookkeeper. And one of our major sponsors this week, our big sponsor for Inspire Tour, is Auto Entry. Now, the Auto Entry guys are fantastic. They're a great bunch. They've worked very closely with us. And when these sort of people first came on the scene, the big worry was that this was going to be the end of the bookkeeper. And I think, to be honest, some of the software companies, not Auto Entry, I have to say, but some of the others, did do very aggressive presentations about why would you need a bookkeeper, because here's your piece of software, you can do it yourself, send it to your accountant, and they'll finish it all off. That's great. But actually, what ICB said, and I've been saying ever since this all started, and now everybody else seems to be saying, is, hold on a minute, it still needs the human touch. That human element is still vitally important. And Auto Entry will be the first to agree with me, as now Receipt Bank as well. You know, we had a big presentation from Receipt Bank summit about 4 or 5 years ago, and their CEO, I think it was, stood up at the time and basically said, bye-bye bookkeepers. He managed to get out of the room, but only just. And I think they've completely changed their attitude now. You know, they are an organization to assist bookkeepers and to assist accountants. And most small businesses really only do books because they have to, and it is a nuisance. And even faced with, you know, take a photograph of your expenses and send it off immediately, even that's too taxing for some of them. So I think bookkeepers are here to stay. That's one of the big things that I've been saying. I would say that, obviously, but I think we've got general support across the board now. But the more a bookkeeper can do to enhance their service without stepping outside what they should and can actually do, I think the more they can do to do that, then the better appreciated they are going to be by their clients. And Peter, you will know, as we say over and over again, never go beyond what you can do. And that's very important. And we test that by qualification. But even when you've got qualified, you need to keep practicing things, because when you might qualify for something that your current list of clients don't need, but tomorrow somebody's going to walk around the corner and say, oh, can you do payroll? And you need to make sure you are up to scratch with everything. So there's a lot of onus on the bookkeeper to get it right. But hopefully with your programs that you're going to be doing, because you're also looking at CPD, etc., we're going to continue to handhold, but even more positively than we have done in the past.
Yeah. You're right, and I think one of the other things that the bookkeeper brings in is a good awareness of what happens in other businesses. So if you have 3, 4, 5 clients, obviously you're not going to give away trade secrets. But if you find that somebody is able to enhance their cash flow by managing, I don't know, by using cash flow, you can say, look, you don't have cash flow forecasts, I can do them for you. And 3 of my clients adopted cash flow forecasts and their cash positions improved by 20%, something like that. And to try to implement best practice as you see it from other people.
Amy, if you're there.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I was just going to say that Zoe Rhymes on Facebook has said she loves cash flow. Classic bookkeeper thing to say. So Zoe Rhymes from Yorkshire, you actually couldn't get onto the Inspire Tour yesterday, I think. You might have had a problem with your login. So I'm pleased that hopefully that's working for you. But
our bookkeepers are wonderful people. They like doing all those strange things that others don't. I mean, it's what turns them on. What gets them going, and they're absolutely fantastic.
Very satisfying stuff. But yes, anyway, and Victor Brownlow liked it too.
You're going to take over for the moment, so
sure.
I'm going to disappear, and I'll let everybody know what happens with my interview with Rob, and hopefully, if it works well, I'll do you a link at some stage. It'll be in the next newsletter probably, so that you can have a look at that. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
See you all later.
Bye, bye, Gary. Bye, bye.
I thought this moment would never come.
I'm just looking on the
chat.
The bit about the exams at home that Tracy's asked about. Do we think it will roll out for other governing bodies like CIMA and ACCA? I know that CIMA are looking at it using a slightly different platform to ours. I'd actually taken a look at it. I didn't like it as much as what we ended up with.
Because you used to work at CIMA and ACCA, didn't you?
Yes, they are both in my background. They're both in my rear view mirrors. But yeah, CIMA, I know CIMA are doing it, and I think they're keeping it temporary. They're saying, and ACCA will find it very, very difficult to do it with the global footprint that they've got and the style of their exams, because they're not even computer-based exams up and down the syllabus. So it's a difficult one for some governing bodies to do. But hey, it's the way forward. It's wonderful. As you've written, Tracy, it's awesome. Awesome.
It's awesome. And we've sort of had this conversation before. The thing that I think we do well is offer an unconventional route into accountancy. And when you think about people who are spending years in their work placement, and obviously I'm sure they enjoy it, but spending years becoming a chartered accountant and the pressure that comes with that. And I met somebody, actually the PQ Awards, so I see your PQ Award is actually behind you. On your mantelpiece.
Yeah, as we say, we'll have a look round.
The award show for part qualified accountants. But yeah, I met somebody there who just said, it's actually kind of my marriage is breaking down because of the pressures of becoming a chartered accountant, and then there's sort of the onus on you to become a partner in the firm that you work for. And I'm really, I'm proud that at ICB we've been able to offer people a really, what I think is a pretty flexible route into this profession.
Well, it's both flexible in terms of how you study and when we don't say you must be ready to take an exam on the 23rd of June or things like that. It's at your convenience, and I'm just so happy that now we've got full flexibility, including the final admitting exam N8. It just adds to that. But the other thing is the relevance of what you learn, and this is one of my guiding principles, and it's another reason why the existing management accounting is going to be replaced, is that what people should learn, or what people are learning in our qualification, is what they are going to do as soon as they finish that final exam. There's no padding in our syllabus. So you're not doing things just because down the line over the years, people have always liked teaching that or found it a reasonable academic intellectual challenge. And other syllabuses do have that sort of stuff in them. The exams are not they're not like University Challenge. They're not testing you on applying maybe useful information, but in a convoluted way to see whether you can do the same calculation but backwards to find out what the starting point would have been. You need, as a bookkeeper, you need to be able to collect together a bunch of invoices and bills and turn them into a set of financial statements. So that's what the exams do. And well, I suppose that is my kind of guiding principle through what should go into a syllabus and how should it be assessed. And we've got great training providers who, when I've started having these conversations, they're saying, that sounds great to me. That sounds fantastic. And again, with the advisory council, they get that. And this isn't all my innovation. I've walked into it as a very nearly rounded way of thinking. It maybe hasn't been said out loud and put across that way, but it certainly is. I've hit the ground running, or I've hit the ground with ICB running.
That's very kind of you to say. And I think, obviously we've hit the ground with bookkeepers running, and for people, who take that, so many of our members, I think, come to us when they've had a moment in their life and they think this is a chance to now do something for myself, whether that's get a new career as a bookkeeper or set up their own business. And it's that moment for me. I just love that moment, hearing about that moment in somebody's life where they think, right, change is coming. So that's exciting to be a part of that, really. I think, now it's 1 minute to 4. I think we could probably wrap up. Thank you ever so much, Peter, for your amazing cash flow presentation. I really do hope everybody gets to see it. We've had, I think, something like 460 people have gone through the content that is already available on the Inspire Tour.
Okay.
There are 2 more videos coming up, which are from our lovely members, Paula and Claire, who are both going to be joining us tomorrow for ICB TV to talk through any questions you've got on their presentations, and they will be joined by Auto Entry, who are our sponsor for the Inspire Tour. I just have remembered something I wanted to say, and we need your help. We're launching a new website later this year, which is super exciting. At the very least, you will be able to use it perfectly on your mobile phone. I can understand that's very frustrating, and it will just start to work better. But as part of that, we are just looking at the way we structure the pages and structure our information. So I wonder if you might be able to help me, if you've got a spare 5 minutes, if I could get you to follow a link and carry out a little test for me to help me see how you think the information should be structured. It's more simple than I'm making it sound, but basically you just follow the link and it will say you're looking for X piece of information. How do you think you should find it? And it's not something it's not a test in the sense that you can get it wrong. And we really just genuinely want to find out whether we are putting things in the right places. Now, the only thing is, I have got to find it. Now, if you go to the forum, I've posted it up on the forum, the 2 links. I'm just thinking I could at least give you a link to that. So I've just called it Request for Website Feedback. And my web design team has sort of challenged me with getting at least 50 people to take part in this test. So if you could be one of them, I would be super grateful. I've just posted the link in the chat box, although it'll be that on that side for you. And if you could follow that, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback, basically. And I will no doubt be posting up little snippets of cool information, leaking information about this new website as soon as I possibly can. But it's, as you can imagine, it's a big job. We want to do it properly. So yeah, please be patient and look forward to it when it happens. But otherwise, a risk of closing this down with the sentence as long as Garry is known for saying. And thank you ever so much for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.